Welcome to Conquer, a parenting podcast with Americ and Alissa. Americ is a mother of three and occupational therapist. My name is Scott Grierson. I am a father of one and elementary educator. On today's show, we have Alissa Marquise. She is going to tell us how to deal with feelings of anger as a parent, and she's from Bounce Back Parenting. Americ, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. I did a parenting challenge for myself. I'm teaching my oldest to drive. Well, my husband and I are. And what I did is I used some tricks from some tips from Alyssa's book, Bounce Back Parenting. And one of her interesting things that she taught was to use 17 seconds before you react. And man, that helped me so much with trying to teach my son how to drive.
Well, that sounds like kind of a dangerous thing to wait 17 seconds before, Max runs into another car. That kind of scares me a little bit.
Okay, yes, I can see your point on that. But what I did was I would, like let's say we're coming up to a stop sign. Instead of me reacting immediately, like a few seconds before the stop sign, I gave him a few seconds. Maybe I didn't give him 17 seconds. I agree. But probably like maybe 7 or 8 seconds to make sure that he was going to stop at the right spot before I said anything. And lo and behold, the kid actually did it. He actually, if I just kept my mouth shut a little bit, he actually, reacted the right way and was really starting to, come into his own with the driving. So I'm proud of myself, first of all,
Okay.
for not reacting so quickly, and I'm proud of my son, for he's doing pretty good with the driving. But I think it helps that I got myself in check. I got, I wasn't angry, but I definitely was, frustrated and worried and anxiety, some anxiety. And as anybody, probably has gone through this with their, teaching their teenager how to drive. So it was an awesome challenge, and I'm keeping it up. I'm trying to not react so quickly, when my kids are annoying me or whatever the situation is. So it was a good challenge for me. So it was good.
I I like it. And if you want to try it at home and share your results on Instagram, you can find us at Instagram over at Conquer a Parenting Podcast. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And we have awesome pictures of our kids and info on our guests and, upcoming podcasts that we're going to be hosting. So, yep.
Excellent. Well, before we share our interview with Alissa, do you have any opening thoughts on how we can deal with anger as parents?
Yeah, I think the first thing that all parents have to do is just focus on, the feeling of anger. Why are they feeling angry? It most times it's not at the person. It can be something else. Whether you didn't take care of yourself, you're hungry, whether you had a bad day at work, your boss is on top of you, you have to get something done, you have to get dinner ready, you have to, drive the kids to sports. There's lots of things on why people can be angry. And I think the first step is to just recognize that you're angry and then try to figure out, wait a second, I'm not mad at my kid because they spilled milk. I'm really mad because I've only got a half an hour to, do, some task, and there's like 5 tasks that you have to do.
Absolutely.
So that would be my first thing, is people really need to just understand, why they're angry.
Excellent. Well, we will discuss this topic further with Alissa right after this short break.
Has your child been recently diagnosed with special needs? Are you facing down something like autism, Down syndrome, ADHD, developmental disability, or dyslexia? If so, I bet you are feeling guilt, self judgment, lack of self confidence, and having relationship struggles. Things that work for other parents don't seem to work for you. No matter how successful you've been in all other areas of your life, this is one situation you weren't expecting. All of the self doubt, overwhelm, self judgment that you're feeling right now can be remedied and reprogrammed. All of this is much easier and more efficient if you have the right support, coach, and mentor on your side who understands what you're going through and knows how to help you, your child, and your family thrive. I specialize in coaching parents of special needs children on how to parent and think differently, which creates lifelong solutions for their entire family. If you're ready to gain self confidence, lose the guilt, and take back control of your life, check out my website, conquersmp.com, and sign up for a free breakthrough session today. I look forward to hearing from you. Again, my website is conquersnp.com. Hey, Scott, can you introduce our amazing guest this week?
Sure. Our guest today is Alissa Marquis. Alissa is a mother of three, author, and founder of Bounce Back Parenting, where she helps to build resilient, connected families by having a growth mindset in parenting. Welcome to the show, Alissa. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
So before we get into our topic of anger, I just want to hear more about your book, because I love your book and I want our readers or our listeners to, hear about it. So let's.
Yeah. Well, just this past year, I published Bounce Back Parenting, a field guide for creating connection, not perfection. And that's really based on my experience of coming into parenting thinking, okay, I'm just going to get everything perfect. Like, I will just do this job right and everything will be okay. And, it didn't take long to discover that was absolutely not how that was going to work. But over the years, thankfully, I've discovered perfectionism is not required. And in fact, perfectionism hampers our connection as parents. And so Bounce Back Parenting talks about how to change our mindset so that we can keep on learning and growing alongside our kids, and we can realize we don't have to be perfect to be connected, loving parents.
Right. Just be yourself and just try to get up every day and do the best you can, and it's okay. Your kids will love you. So.
Yeah. And it's like easier said than done. So in the book, I get into a little bit of the mindsets that trip us up on that. And, I help people kind of get through the walls that they wind up putting in front of themselves for creating those connections and feeling that enjoyment in parenting. I think sometimes that escapes us because we get so serious about all of it.
Right. And one of your things that Scott and I really liked was well, I don't know but it was a quote. It said, "I never knew I had a temper until I had kids." So, I mean, that was just like so real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's really sharing a lot about, who we are, who you are. So can you just, go over that for our listeners?
Oh man, it's so true. Like I didn't know. And I remember the first time I lost my temper as a parent, and my son was maybe 8 or 9 months old, and we'd been in the car for 15 minutes of screaming, and all of a sudden out of my mouth came this horrible, I don't know what I said, but I yelled it at him. I yelled at my baby, just stop crying, something like that. And I remember being shocked that had happened. And frankly, that was the first of many times of losing my temper. It shocked me to discover that I had that ability inside, unfortunately, to just lose it. However, it also opened up real learning to how to handle those overwhelming feelings. Because certainly I couldn't just accept, well, I'm going to spend the rest of my parenting just screaming my head off whenever I'm upset. Right. Okay, that was not an option.
Yeah, so you had to find a different way.
Alyssa, before we get into the solutions for, kind of solving those problems, it made me think of an issue I'm having. In my professional career, I'm a private tutor where I work with kids, and I never had a problem losing my patience and, having a temper with my students, because I feel like I dealt with one student at a time, and when I brought in a new student, it was kind of like a whole new cup of patience that I had, right? Because I got rid of one student, whatever patience I had left for them went out the door, and then I had a whole new cup of patience with my new student. But with my daughter, I find that, you never get to change that cup of patience out. It's always working from the same thing. And I find it's much more easy for me to lose my patience with my daughter than it is actually with my students. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think for one thing, it's one thing with your students, you can see them as an outside person. Sure, some of your pride is wrapped up in being a good math tutor, but it's way, way different than how deeply personal our relationship with our kids is. And so if anything is going to be triggered inside of you, the feeling inside that our kids can bring up, they touch so deeply inside our heart, and we can wind up being so wrapped up thinking, well, gosh, here was one of my core beliefs. If my kids are happy, then everything's okay, and I'm doing a good job as a parent. And, at the beginning of this recording, I said that I had this idea of like, well, I'm just going to do parenting right, and then everything will be okay. And so when your child is out of sorts, you can accidentally start identifying with that out of sortsness and start thinking it means that you are doing something wrong. Instead of, I'm sure, like if you're tutoring a child in math and they're really struggling with a math problem, you're not looking at that and saying, wow, I can't do math well, I'm a horrible math teacher now. No, you're seeing, well, this is my job. This is the child struggling with math. You don't identify with it. So I think that's one part with our own kids. We can get wrapped up in their stuff and a little bit confused about what it actually means. And then as far as refilling our cups, I think that's just real. It's just true. We do sometimes reach that point of having no more patience left because we've been going nonstop. I think the other thing that we forget sometimes is how important it is to make self-care part of the process instead of something we put off until it's easy. And I think in our culture today, self-care might sound like, well, I don't know, for women, go to a spa or, take 3 hours to meditate and have quiet time. And that, especially when you're parenting young children, is so not realistic.
Well, a spa and 3 hours of quiet time sound fantastic to me. It doesn't have to be just for women, I don't think. So.
Yeah, no, but so I certainly hear it as a woman. And I'm not very spa oriented, so I'm always like, that's really not my thing.
Right.
But yeah, anyway, as a parent of young children, self-care is like, I'm actually going to eat lunch today. It can be, you know what I mean? And so it's like your patience, you're losing patience with the emotional aspect of it and not filling up the cup of just normal human needs.
Right,
too.
needs, yeah. Or just go to the bathroom by yourself. Like
totally. Like in my book, I have this list of ridiculously simple self-care things. And one of them was, no, don't wait, go pee.
Right. Until you're like squeezing everything together. You're like, no, I just have to, one more thing.
Right?
Oh, it's so true. It's so true.
And suddenly you're like screaming about something when the reality is if you'd have gone pee 30 minutes ago, you'd have one less irritation on your list.
Right. Or like you're cold and you're like, I can't go upstairs and get a sweater right now. I just can't do it. It's like, stop and go get a sweater. It's okay. All right. So those are great insights. Awesome insights. So talk to us about STOP, S-T-O-P, stop your parent tantrums.
Sure. So when I was really in the thick of trying to get a hold around my anger inside and trying to, get some distance from that feeling of fury to my actions. I mean, that's what we're doing here is we're creating space between what arises in us and how we handle it. And I came up with this acronym, which is STOP. And the first thing was stop. We've got to give ourselves permission to pause. It may be starting out as just a fraction that you're pausing there. So stop, catch yourself, stop acting, stop trying to solve things. I mean, obviously, unless it's like a life-threatening situation,
right.
But most of the things that we deal with, they may be loud, messy, disorganized, but they're not actually that dangerous. It's just our brain thinking that they are an emergency.
And then the second part, taking a time out. We just had a podcast about timeouts, but you're not talking about putting your child in timeout. You're kind of talking about taking a parent timeout.
No, yeah, it's like time out in your own brain. Like, whoa, time out, self. Let's this when I wrote this, I was thinking about like sometimes I had to actually plug my ears. I'm really noise sensitive, and I would be so that's I'm sorry. Let me just read this. It's stop, time out, organize, plan,
Okay.
and it was stop myself. So stop trying to solve things and stop trying to yell over the kids and get things figured out. Time out. Take a pause for myself. If I had to, it would be go in the other room, have the kids in a safe place, go in the other room, look outside for a second, take a time out from the problem. If you have to, plug your ears for a second to put down some of the sensory information coming in. Organize your thoughts. What's the reality of right now? What really has to happen in this next moment? We sometimes have a list in our heads of 50 things when the reality is you just need to get everybody lunch. That's the reality. Then we can go on. And so then plan. Once you're a little bit more calm, plan your next step. You've come to the reality. Okay, let's say the reality was everybody's melting down because they're hungry. Plan, I'm going to get everybody a snack. Then we're going to reassess how the day goes.
Right. That's good. I love it. And that's something that any parent in any situation, could use. So that's a really good thing to remember. So another thing you talk about is parent rage, when you're like in such a rage. So what's your thoughts on that? You have like an emergency plan changes, or what can you tell us about that?
Parenting rage are those times when you're the one having the tantrum. You're out of control. I think that anybody listening to this, if they have had parenting rage, they know what that means. It's that time when you are losing it. And if you continue on the path that you're going, it's probably just going to get worse. So emergency plan changes are like realizing, oh my gosh, I was crazy to think that I could take all 3 kids on 6 errands today, cross off these other 3 that are not going to work, get everybody McDonald's on the way home, and, go home and cry a little bit in my bedroom. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think emergency plan changes for me, especially, I know when I wrote that was when my kids were littler, and I would have the fantasy of how everything should be. We should have this awesome lunch and it's going to be wonderful. And then I had 3 kids under age 5, and one of them had sensory integration issues and, needed like therapy once a week. And, it was just like.
Right. It was an extra
thing.
Change
the plan. Chill out. So they're eating hot dogs for the 3rd time this week. It's reprioritizing a little bit.
Right. Yeah, no, that's such a good, it's almost like you have to know your triggers a little bit too as a parent.
100%.
Like if, like my triggers out with media. I'm like, it's the worst thing ever. And it's like, well, I've done a lot of thought process on that, because it's really not. We're using media right now to record this podcast. It's an amazing, invention, but so it's good to know as a parent your trigger, so then you can kind of figure out, if you have sensory problems as a parent, or, whatever it is, you have to understand yourself so you can help your kids.
That's so huge. And understanding and accepting yourself. I have a friend who realized when her kids were little that one of her anger triggers was cold floors. She was like, it literally just took me realizing I need to wear shoes in my house.
Right.
Obviously that didn't cure everything, but it was one of those where she was like, instead of just fighting this, put on the shoes.
Right. It's okay. Or buy yourself some really warm slippers, and there you go.
Things like that where you feel like, if I try to explain this trigger to someone, it seems silly. So it's one of your triggers, there are many little comfort things we can do in our lives that rather than fight them, we could just be proactive and take care of it, and it reduces our stress level as a parent, giving us more patience.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So another thing is, the guilt that you feel as a parent after you have one of your your angry moments, or you have some rage. What are some suggestions to deal with that guilt, as a parent?
Well, I think where guilt can get dangerous is when, actually, Brene Brown talks about this. There's a difference between guilt and shame. And when we slip from guilt into shame, we are starting to say, this is about me as a person. I am actually horrible. I am actually terrible. And that motivates zero action. That's the kind of thing that makes you even less able to deal with your anger, because you just go into that black pit of, I have ruined everything. This is worthless.
Yeah.
Are you saying that guilt is a separate thing from shame, or is it like a stepstone to shame?
Well, I am not Brene Brown, so I am trying to say this as best as I understand it.
Understood.
And her book, Daring Greatly, is fantastic to read more about this, by the way. But the way that I understand it, it's like guilt can be like, here were my actions. I don't like those actions. I'm going to be proactive about changing those actions. And if you take the judgment out of that, you can actually use that feeling of guilt as a stepping stone for something positive. You can go, ooh, I didn't like how the end of that play date went when I yelled at my kid and yanked on their arm to go out of the park. Ooh, God, I don't feel good about that. That's guilt. Now, if you go down the shame route and down the shame spiral, you think, I'm a horrible person. I can't tell anybody that ever happened. I'm going to pretend it never happened, and you just close it off. Well, you're losing all of your opportunity to learn from it at that point in time.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas if you go, ooh, I didn't like the end of that play date. I didn't like how it happened. And you go, I don't want to keep doing that. Okay, I love myself enough to know that I can grow and I can learn. All right, I'm going to look at a podcast like this. I'm going to read a book and figure out some different ways to handle that situation in the future.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. That's exactly what you have to do as a parent. You can't close off the feelings that you're feeling, but you also can't let them push you into the dark hole either. There's a delicate balance there. You have to learn, because no parent is perfect, no person is perfect, and no kid is perfect. So you have to deal with all of that. And you're right. If you just hang on to that guilt, or you hang on to whatever feeling you have, it just doesn't serve you. It takes you in another place, and your kid doesn't want you there anyway. They don't want you to feel guilty. They just want you to change a little bit.
You know what has helped me the most, and continues to help me the most, is right in that moment when that guilt starts to wash over you. My first thing I do is breathe. Just take a breath, focus on that air, and then I like to find a mantra that helps center me. And my favorite mantra for many years has been by Karl Bard, and he says, though no one can go back and make a brand new start, anyone can start from now and make a brand new ending.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. That's so beautiful.
Not freeing. Like, you can't go back and make a brand new start, but you can start from now and make a brand new ending. And
yeah,
if you can find a mantra like that centers you, it could be as simple as start from now. Start from now. It'll help things wash through and just allow you that restart.
Yeah, it helps you shed it. Right? It's like, just let it go. I know that's, so for some people are like, oh, that's easier said than done. And it's like, well, you have to, it's not easy. It's not easy to let go of feelings and all that. But in order to move forward and be a better parent, you have to. You just have
it's funny
to
you
find
said
a
that,
way.
because the first thing that went through my head was that it's easier said than done. But then I'm looking back at our show notes and I see our acronym STOP, and I'm like, that's exactly what you were just talking about earlier, where if you can just stop yourself in that moment instead of internalizing the guilt, if you can step back and organize and make a plan that's productive versus, internalizing negative feelings, I think it could be, you can turn something negative into a positive It's just having the, I don't know, foresight to be able to apply it when it's in that heat of the moment that I think I struggle with. Because intellectually, I understand what you're saying and it
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. But in the heat of the moment, it's much more difficult to stop and be intellectual about it.
100%. And actually, that was something I kind of wanted to touch on, where all of this really has to start. And I feel like it's kind of an uncomfortable place to start, but because it doesn't feel big enough. But the place it has to start with is awareness. And so when it comes to anger and parenting, it's very uncomfortable to talk about and to get in there and to see what's happening. But the more that you can start becoming mindful of what was happening. So we were talking about triggers. Well, the first time, the first 10 times, maybe the first 100 times you are triggered by something, you might not notice it, you know?
Yeah.
But as you start to as you start to say the first step to solving a problem, the first step to changing is becoming aware of it, then you start looking at those triggers. Okay, why is it that every time we go to make dinner, I start yelling at the kids? What's going on? You know, and you start noticing. Maybe you keep a journal, maybe you talk to a friend and start fleshing out. This seems to be the pattern. It's looking for those patterns. And then what happens is once you get into the moment, you know, like you were talking about, Scott, where it's really hard to get into that rational brain. When you've become more mindful of it, gradually you get more and more space in that moment to be rational.
Right.
Because
to
all of
make
a sudden your brain
change.
it's starting to shift that pattern. It's starting to go, wait a minute, I know this pattern and I know that my usual response, it doesn't work. And that's when solutions start gradually showing up, because you've created that space to go, I'm ready to shift this.
Right. Absolutely. And that comes into on your website that you had some really great points. One was 17 seconds, a quick way to reduce anxiety. So that's like the perfect ending to talk
Yeah.
about that. So can you go tell us about that?
That is perfect right now. So I believe it was in Five Love Languages, Gary Chapman talks about most people don't wait 17 seconds before interrupting a conversation. I don't know where he got that number, but I went ahead and decided to try it. Well, sure enough, I am so ready to interrupt way earlier than 17 seconds into something. And so if you don't just think about this conversationally, think about it when you get an urge to jump in with something that your kids are doing. Maybe they're really frustrated about something. And you are like, ooh, I want to fix that. Here, you need to do this, da 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 da. You know, you need to put the dishes in the dishwasher this way. If you just try it, just on your fingers, quietly count to yourself 17 seconds and see what happens. They might come up with a solution on their own. It could be in the moment when you're really annoyed with something that your kid is doing. Helps increase that mindfulness. Your snap reaction might be to bark at them.
Right.
And if you can just count to 17, see if you can access that mindful place in your mind again. You know, it gives you that little bit of response. And then even when it comes to connecting with your kids, you ask them a question. They don't respond quickly. Well, they might need a second. Instead of feeding them more information to try to get something out of them, just pause.
Right.
So try this a few
it.
times. Try this for those moments when you have an urge to keep pushing yourself out, whether it's fixing, giving a solution, adding more to the conversation. Just check out what happens and experiment with where these places that you give a little bit of space. You just learn interesting things in the world.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to try it on my daughter because she's not a big hugger and I have to tackle her. And it's really hard to tackle an 11-year-old who's really tall.
Do we need to have a podcast about
Maggie's very huggable. Get out of
Oh
here.
no,
She's
she's
great.
not. She's so not. I love her. She's like a little chili pepper. So I'm gonna be like, we have to hug for 17 seconds, Maggie. I'm literally gonna do it. She's gonna love it.
Actually, that's a cool one to see.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah,
Do
yeah. Maybe she'll like calm down. Maybe it'll be like because it's like deep input, that kind of thing. So yeah. Oh,
Well,
it was
this
so.
is a this is a great place to end an amazing conversation. Before we let you go, Alissa, I do want to give you a chance to tell our listeners where they might find out more about you, more about your website, Bounce Back Parenting.
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is come find me on my website at bouncebackparenting.com. And you'll be able to find my book there and lots of different blog articles. You can also find me on social media on Facebook or Instagram. I particularly like chatting on Instagram, and both of those are Bounce Back Parenting.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know Scott did too. So we really appreciate you coming on our show.
Thanks. It was great to be here.
Thank you.
Bye,
Take
Alissa.
care.
This segment of the show is brought to us by MathRadio.com. MathRadio.com offers educational math courses for students between the ages of 7 and 17. So if your child is in the 3rd grade, 7th grade, or even high school, they have courses for you. Sign up today at MathRadio.com for any math course for only $9.99. Help your kids do better in class, get better grades, score higher on exams, and even get into college. Act now and get your courses at mathradio.com for as little as $9.99. Again, that is www.mathradio.com. I want to say thank you one more time to Alissa Marquise for joining us on the show today. As always, you can join us over at Instagram. Americ, what are we at Instagram?
We're at Conquer, a parenting podcast, and you can find pictures of our awesome kids, info on our guests, and any upcoming podcasts that we have.
Excellent. Speaking of upcoming podcasts, next week we will be joined by Dr. Magdalena Battles, and she's going to talk to us about time management. I'm certainly excited about that one, as we kind of hinted on it earlier today. Americ, any final words of wisdom for today?
Oh, boy.
Yes, we are in podcast form, so you cannot see the look of horror on Americ's face as I hit her with this question without any kind of prompting at all. But Americ is full of wisdom, so I'm sure you can share something with our guests as we head out the door.
I can. And, because everybody has, how about some homework? How about we give our listeners some homework?
Okay, let's hear it.
So because that works so well with me doing the 17 seconds of before I react, I would love it if our listeners could just implement that in one area of their life, whether it's with their kids or with their boss or, or
With
whoever.
their spouse.
Their spouse, their coworker, and just kind of count 17 seconds before you react and see how it serves you. See what happens if you implement that in your life. So that's your homework.
All right, I like it. Okay, we will see you next week. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.